The Pistons, to me, and you and I talked a little bit about this before we jumped on, so I know you agree with this. They are a case study in what happens when you double down on your strengths. Like you double down on your strengths and you play to the strengths of your roster, and I love that they're doing that. You could look at their roster build, and say, oh, they have all of these weaknesses. They have two quality centers. How do you make those two guys work together? They have a wing who can't shoot, and that's still one of their best players. How do you make that work? That seems like an extreme weakness or a limitation, but they found a way to make it so that they can make those things a strength rather than a weakness. And if you listen to the show occasionally, you might think, XJ loves five shooters. He loves five out. That is true. I do. That's totally true. But that doesn't mean I hate anything that's not five out. And Jeff, we've had this discussion before where we discussed all things equal, is it better to have a 4+1, so four shooters and one non-shooting rim threat, or a 3+1, so three shooters and two non-shooting rim threats? And while obviously, like I said, I would prefer five shooters as long as, all things are equal there, I'd strongly prefer a 3+1 over a 3+2 over a 4+1, because a lot of teams do these half measures where they're like, okay, we're gonna, we know spacing is important in the modern NBA, and so we're gonna put a shooter on the court because we have to, but we really don't have the personnel to really go five out, so we're kind of doing this mid ground between these two options. Just double down, just play to who you have. The Pistons said, forget all that. We're gonna play some lineups. Maybe when Tobias Harris is out, we're gonna play a ton of Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren, and Ausar Thompson. We're going to play them all out there together. Obviously, Isaiah Stewart can shoot, and that's something that we should talk about as well. But I just think that that's so great because you get your competitive advantage when your team is playing to its strengths, and such that you overwhelm your opponents in one area to the point where they now have to start adjusting to how you play to deal with your strengths, as opposed to being able to play to their strengths. And so that's such a major factor in the Pistons' early success. And I think it's going to hold up because of the level of talent they have, the strength that they have, and the roster construction really, really facilitates it well in the way that JB has coached them. I think it's great. So I'm super excited to talk about the Pistons. Aside from giving that kind of general overview on what they try to do from a philosophical standpoint, where do you want to start with diving into the details on the Detroit Pistons, Jeff?
That is where I want to start. Pistons fans who are listening to us for the first time are about to find out why we have a show together, because I was sure you were going to swing it to me before you did your intro, and this is exactly where I was going to start. And this is so exciting because the Pistons almost by themselves put to bed this silly narrative that the NBA is boring because it's monotonous. And, you have all these teams that just play exactly the same. They're all just like trying to drive and spray. And I'm not saying that like Cade Cunningham isn't creating advantages and then trying to find 3-point shooters. He is. But the Pistons are awesome in a way that's totally different than a team like the Knicks or the Cavs in the East. Like, they do it their own way. And I thought I thought the way you stated it was so perfect. Like, this is a front office and a coaching staff that has self-awareness and in lockstep is honing in on the strengths of its rosters and trying to leverage those strengths rather than just play like everybody else and be a bad version of other teams. They could be a 4+1 or even like a fake 5+0 if they really wanted to, but they would be one of the worst in the league at that. Why would they do that just because everybody else is doing it? No, they are really, really good at certain things, and they're just doubling down on those things. And I want to get in, we should really get into what we're talking about when we talk about what their strengths are. Their strengths are defense and their size, and both of those things correlate with one player who we'll get into here in a second. But I just want to share some data for, I'm sure there are Pistons fans who are going to come in here and this is going to be intuitive to them, but I want to be able to package it in a way that like you guys would be like, yeah, like I knew this, but 8.3% of the Pistons field goal attempts are putbacks. That's highest in the league. And they generate fouls on 23% of those putbacks. Crazy. Absolutely nuts. Like, they're just dominating the offensive glass. Despite being 19th in overall touches, they're first in the NBA in paint touches and third in turnover percentage on paint touches. And they create the third most free throw attempts off of paint touches. They lead the NBA in blocks. They are just absolutely dominating the paint on both ends of the court. And that's why if you zoom out and you look 17th in pace, 25th in true shooting percentage, a middle of the road overall offense, you really have to zoom in to understand why this team is great. Third in offensive rebound percentage. Doesn't matter that they're not making a lot of threes. They retain a lot of their possessions. And as I just alluded to, when they're in the paint, they're destroying other teams. They're fifth in defensive rating. They are a great defense, and that's what they're leaning into. And unlike a team that we talked about on Monday, the Knicks, we said about the Knicks, they need a great offense and a requisite defense. They need just to meet the baseline of a defense to pair with their all-time great offense. The Pistons can do the other thing. They can have an amazing defense and just enough offense to get by, and leaning into things like paint touches, offensive rebounds, it's helping them have raise the floor of their offense to pair with their great defense. I absolutely love their strategy. I think it's brilliant the way they've leaned into the strengths of their roster, and I love how you put